Hi, and welcome to EUB343 Assessment Task 2 Showcase video. My name is Dominic Paino. My student number is N9721703. My tutors' names were Dr. Nerida Spina and Danielle Gordon, and my tutorial day and time was Wednesday 11:30 till 2:20. The school I taught at was a 7 to 12 Brisbane North Area Metropolitan Co-Educational School. It had one campus with 950 students. It was in a low socio-economic area. The class I taught was a Year 8 English class. It was a class of 26 students, but the whole class was rarely there due to a range of factors. The class was low level and all students had access to iPad or computer. The unit I was teaching was designed around dystopian worlds and dystopian fiction, and the essential question for this unit was what could the world be like if things don't change? So the learning intention that I chose was students will have an understanding of the 9 characteristics of a dystopian world and be able to identify them in a dystopian text or video. This applied to the content descriptor in the Year 8 English strand of literacy, and underneath literacy, it was interpreting, analysing and evaluating. So the chosen descriptor was apply increasing knowledge of vocabulary, text structures and language features to understand the content of text. So the initial assessment that I chose was diagnostic assessment. Effective diagnostic assessment should check students' prior knowledge, any weaknesses or misconceptions, and plan their learning experience due to their needs, amongst other things. I set a range of questions for the students to answer on the whiteboard, which I then collected. So as you can see on screen, here are the 5 questions. Question 1 was what does it mean for information to be restricted? Question 2, what does living under constant surveillance mean? Question 3, what does it mean to have to live by uniform expectations? Question 4, why would it be a bad thing for everything to be controlled by one person? And question 5 was what is propaganda? So these questions were designed to test if students had any knowledge of the 9 characteristics of a dystopian world and what they mean, or to just check if they had any knowledge of the actual term. So as you can see, here's an example of one student's work where I can see that not a lot of knowledge is there in regards to the 9 characteristics. As with question 5, what is propaganda, they have put props. So from these results, I made this graph and I split the students into 3 sections for each question. So section 1 was marks given. This is where a student has shown some indication of knowledge of the term and what it means. Section 2 was an attempt. This is where the student has attempted to answer the question. However, the answer is lacking or incorrect. And section 3 was no attempt. This is where the student has not provided an answer. So as you can see, there were a lot of questions where students did not provide any answers. Question 4, students did provide a lot of answers and I gave them marks for that because they did show that they had some understanding of why it would be bad if only one person controlled everything. But I can tell from this data that not a lot of students had a very good base of knowledge of the characteristics. So here's the data for the whole class. As you can see with student 19, they have not answered any questions, whereas student 14, marks were given for 3 answers. So that shows me that there is a varying level of knowledge in this class. So from these findings, these results helped shape the base for the unit that I designed. This choice of diagnostic assessment helped to do a number of important things. The Ministry of Education explained that effective diagnostic assessment provides a range of targeted strategies that teachers can use to plan next steps in instruction and student learning. So how I taught the content was at the start of every lesson, students would come in, write down the learning intention of the lesson, and then have a short writing activity. This activity are designed to be a response to stimulus for the entirety of my prac, and the students would respond to a range of images, videos, or text related to dystopian themes. They started off quite simple and some as informal conversations before becoming individual work with more open-ended type questions to check for knowledge and understanding. This class required a lot of teacher-led activities and learning to begin with, as it was quite a heavy content focus. However, students were then given time to work both as groups, pairs, and also individually in the end to complete these tasks. So I taught this unit and designed it with a taxonomy of Kendall in mind. They designed a 4-level taxonomy for student learning in terms of cognition, meaning what thinking skills are expected of students. The levels of the taxonomy are 1, retrieval, 2, comprehension, 3, analysis, and 4, knowledge utilization. So my unit was designed to incorporate the first 3 levels. This is because when I finished my prac, they were just starting to work on their assessment piece, which would incorporate level 4. So over the course of my prac, I used a number of formative assessment strategies. Formative assessment is described by the Department of Education as providing evidence to monitor and provide feedback on student learning and informs differentiation of teaching and learning. These types of formative assessment range from hand signals to tell me understanding to worksheets and written tasks, and they were designed to try and incorporate high impact teaching strategies. This is where students self-monitor their progress and provide evidence they believe demonstrates that they have achieved their goals. So the first worksheet handed out, the lesson after working through and writing down the definition of the characteristics, was the worksheet that you can see on screen. So this is from student A, who I will use a number of their images during this work case. And they've shown that there was not a very good retrieval level of knowledge here, as they have not answered all questions and also have answered some questions incorrect. So that showed me that I had to go back and run through the characteristics with this student. And this was something I found with the whole class. The purpose of this activity was to showcase understanding of dystopian characteristics in multiple texts. So this was 2 weeks into my prac, after I had explained the definitions and we'd gone through the Hunger Games as a class. As you can see, they both had the same answers for that. But then I got the students to split into small groups and discuss amongst themselves whether these characteristics came up in these texts and also how many times. So as you can see, the students mostly agree with each other, but the student on the bottom has some more ticks in their sections, which could show a higher level of understanding compared to the top student. I then proceeded to do a mind map of a kind with looks like, sounds like, and feels like of a dystopian world. So this showed me what information students have gathered from other dystopian texts and could recall as what they found interacts with a lot of dystopian text. So as you can see, students have put things like, it looks like dirty, ruins, messy. It also shows a good level of knowledge in the feels like section, because it feels like depressed, loneliness, not being considered as a person, and uncomfortable. And then proceeded to do a quiz 1 week before I left. This quiz focused on whether the students had a good level of knowledge to show that we could move on to their assessment piece. So with question 4, I again linked back to my learning intention of whether they could identify these characteristics in a dystopian text, as we chose the Hunger Games. And down the bottom, I have a focus on my feedback. So feedback should answer 3 questions to be effective. Where am I going? How am I going? And where to next? And this is something I struggled with during my prac and aimed to improve. So this knowledge check and assessment plan in lesson, I had 5 posters on the board that students had to respond to. So as you can see on the left, they've chosen to just respond to 1, whereas on the right, they've picked 1 characteristic from each. So my feedback here is lacking and does not meet the 3 criterion. So I've tried to improve on that throughout my prac. So my last piece of formative assessment, there were 22 students present on each attempt, and this assessment was given 1 week between each attempt. So the students had to watch a film trailer and respond to whether it met the criterion of a dystopian world. So as you can see, on attempt 1, 16 out of 22 students had between 1 to 3 characteristics listed, and this dropped to 9 out of 22 on the second attempt. 8 out of 22 had more than 40 words, which rose to 18 on the second attempt. And most importantly, on the first attempt, 5 out of 22 listed 0 characteristics or signs of characteristics, whereas on the second attempt, no children had 0 characteristics listed. So after the first attempt, I tried to provide some feedback for the students, as we can see again with student A. And in this feedback, I tried to give them some prompts, but also some positive recognition. So I've started off by saying that they had some really great notes, but to try and link back to some of the 9 characteristics. And as you can see in the second attempt, the student has completed this and they have tried to link back to the characteristics, which is really good and shows that these students are starting to have that knowledge there. So over the course of my 4 weeks with this class, I think there is sufficient evidence of an achievement of my learning intention. My diagnostic results showed that the students not only did not know the characteristics, but also had no clear knowledge of what the key words of the characteristics meant. Whereas by the end of my prac, most students had an understanding of these characteristics, as demonstrated in the results of the formative assessment. Most students could identify at least 3 characteristics in the Hunger Games film and also in the film trailer. Some strategies for my future professional practice is I want to improve my effective feedback on all forms of student work and assessment. So as was seen in my student work, my feedback was lacking and was not meeting the 3 criterion of being effective feedback. So that's something I really want to focus on in my future practice and also my future profession. And I'd also like to incorporate more use of ICTs in my diagnostic and formative assessment. So as was stated at the start, most students or all students had access to a ICT device of an iPad or a computer, but none of my assessment used this. And I think that's something I could have taken advantage of in this class. Lastly are my references, and thank you for listening.